Uh, for that move, I'll go ahead and talk about that. Oh, I gotta wait for the record.
Mark, you're good to go.
We good?
Yep, you're good. We're live. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Right on schedule.
Here we go. Okay, so folks in the room are gonna get a replay. Positive changes, a refresh of the NERC rules of procedure, upcoming changes to functional mapping, and onboarding for the primary compliance officers, primary compliance contacts, and alternate compliance contacts. So let's talk about changes a little bit. Change is good. There's this is a quote from an author that I've read a couple of books. The last one I read was, the title's not too intriguing, but it was a good book, and that was Who Will Cry When I Die? So it's actually not as depressing as it sounds, but it's a great book. Change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. So the gorgeous at the end for us are going to be functional mapping. So I'll just let you know that now. Registration was previously under the entity risk and reliability group. Certification was previously under event analysis and situational awareness. The registration certification will now be a standalone group reporting to Kim Israelson, Director of Oversight Planning and Analysis. So we're looking forward to that. And part of that change is because, you know, you can see some gaps at times, and we want to close those gaps and eliminate duplicate work. First, we'll review the certification. So as we all know that the organizational certification process, this is a standard process for real-time actions that involve RCs, TOPs, and BAs. The certification process, we're going to look at procedures, we're going to look at the processes, and some of you may have been through this process before. This is really an in-depth look at the operations in real time and how you'll be performing those. The organizational certification review process is a little different. Let's say you're a BA or you're a TOP. And when I say it's a little different, we're going to be, you know, EMS changes, changes that could have an impact, that you're changing EMS and its hardware. It gives, we're going to go in and look, you've already been operating. So let's say you're going to change out your EMS from one vendor to another, and that's a complete overhaul of hardware. We're going to want to know what that looks like. Are the operators getting trained? Are the procedures up to date? And we know that you're already doing that, but we want to ensure. And so it's not quite the same as a full-blown certification, but we want to take a look at those processes and procedures. So some of the items that could consider a certification review are changes to the entity's footprint, including decertification, a JRO CFR that's been decertified or canceled, relocation of a control center, as I mentioned a minute ago, modification of EMS. We're going to look at situational awareness tools, functionality, our machine interfaces. We really just want to know how you guys are still operating and how you're going to help those operators understand and make those changes during the process. So one of the things that NERC rules of procedure emphasizes, as you can see on the screen, Section 500 of the NERC ROP, page 42, section 1.3.5. And I've highlighted these sections because we have run across recently entities that may not have been aware that they were supposed to notify us of a footprint change or even an EMS upgrade. And it's kind of caught off guard a little bit, and we were like, whoa. So we just want to make sure that everyone understands that out of this section, any corrections, revisions, deletions, changes in ownership, corporate structure, or similar matters that affect the registered entity's responsibility with respect to reliability standards. So we really do need to understand the changes that are going on within your organization and how you're operating, to understand and make sure it's in accordance with the reliability standards. Okay, this is the gorgeous part I talked about, and I don't see anybody getting excited because I said that. So here we go. So we are changing the functional mapping. Since I came into registration and certification in April, we quickly was already in process of making changes to cores, centralized organizational. Where's my card? Centralized organization registration ERO system. That's the reason why I carry that in my pocket. It hasn't burned into the brain yet. So we use the functional mapping. And some entities are like, why do I have to map? There's a good reason. And this is a huge machine that we talk about all the time that's constantly running, and we need to understand how folks are interacting with each other. And that's part of your registration, is to do the functional mapping. I'm going to say this, that the functional mapping currently in course for us on our side is not very good. So that's the reason why we went in and made a lot of changes. And those changes are really to benefit the entities just as much as it is for us to understand. And I'll demonstrate that here in a minute. The team was put together and it was a focus group of folks that came from entities that really, the focus group, we would go back to the focus group and say, here's the changes we've made. Here's what we're working on. And let me just say this is led by NERC, and there's 4 regions participating currently. And what you see up on the screen right now, if you've not seen this, this is the functional mapping as we see it on the left. Entities would submit the data for mapping. Entities across the top would validate those. Now we can get into that a little deeper, but also, as you can see, those particular ones that are highlighted, yellow, the light blue, and the green. There's actually from ROP states on some of the mapping that needs to be done. And then there's the NERC standards that line up with the mapping. And then there's important considerations we need to see. So I know Phil O'Donnell's in the room, Julie Blair, who's our international manager. The 3 of us had to respond to some notices, and they requested a functional diagram of what functional mapping looks like. They didn't particularly like the graph that was on the page previously. So as I sat and thought about this, and as my background is mainly operations, longtime operator, I was like, oh boy, I get to draw a bunch of circles and squares, and that's my thing. So I sat down and went through it. So and I know this is an eye chart, but you should have the slides. So this is really from a linear is what we gave them. And we said, okay, this is what we're looking at. But then Phil and I started talking, and we were like, okay, what else does it look like? Well, I started putting together a Venn diagram. When I said, okay, we're all on top of each other. We got the balancing authority. What, this is really, really a little confusing this way. So I wasn't finished. I just couldn't help myself, really. So the point of this is that you can see how extremely complicated this is when everybody's doing business. Day-to-day business is what it amounts to. So I'm not going to go into the details of this, but you can, please, I would love to talk to you about it anytime. So, it's very complicated, and this is why we want to know what the functional mapping is. And, let me just say this as well. When you mapped an entity for the registration purposes, we hear things like, I don't want to take on their compliance responsibility. Well, you're not taking on their compliance responsibility. Yes, you may have a little more responsibility according to a standard and requirement, but you're not taking on that entity's responsibility. Man, I hate getting away from the diagrams. So some of the functional mapping within cores, it's going to be creating an acknowledgement feature. It's going to be creating a notification feature. It's going to be migrating and centralizing existing data from other systems. And what that means is we're two regions are using web CDMS. We'll no longer be using that, as you may well be aware of. That's getting imported, excuse me, into cores. Improving the user interface, improving data entry controls, and improving data architecture. Now, we're not quite there yet. We hope that it will be around the first of the year, first quarter. But sometimes things gonna get away, but that's what we're targeting. So the game plan is for phase one. We'll hold webinars, training videos, industry-wide software release, and workshops, and then completion of the data validation. So there's a lot of unacknowledged mapping within cores right now. So some folks are going to have to go through. It's not going to be a huge crunch because WEC's already done it. Other regions have already gone through and verified some of the data. But there will be a data validation to make sure, hey, yes, this is correct. Phase two, data acknowledgement, industry-wide software release, acknowledgement, completion of data acknowledgement period. And then phase three will be a targeted outreach program. So we're not sure at this point whether it's going to be start with one region and then, maybe another one, some of the similar processes that we've done with other software releases. Within functional mapping, the current look is to your left, and the new functional mapping is to your right. So there's definitely going to be a difference in how we do this. It's really currently, it's not a good setup for us, and it kind of leaves us still a little bit in the dark. So you'll go in and acknowledge, or I'm sorry, you'll go in and enter, and it will actually give you a prompt and tell you, lead you a little bit in the direction of where you're mapping to. This is what the new functional mapping screen is going to look like. It's a great improvement over what we've currently have, and what you'll see as you go through and you'll do acknowledgements on this page. You'll do data verification, and as you enter for a new mapping, you'll also receive to verify the functional mapping. Is this basically what you want to do? Now, I've included these screens because I think it's important that we understand what we do not have this. This is on our side. We do not have this right now. And I'm really looking forward to it. This is going to be able to pull up a report that I can see who's mapped to and who's not mapped at all. Currently, when I go through cores and doing a registration, it might pop up a yellow and say, hey, functional mapping problem. But I wouldn't know that unless I've gone through and maybe doing some other, maybe a footprint change to that degree for one of you all. And that's when I see it. So that's a big improvement for us. We're looking forward to that. And again, the mapping, missing required functional mapping report, which will tell us the mapping that we need to have a conversation about. And if you disagree with the functional mapping or you're still not sure about it, please come talk to me during the breaks anytime. Please email me because it's really an important understanding that I'd like to help folks with. The next slide is going to be, and I know I don't want everybody to cheer at one time, okay? You will get emails about acknowledgements. We will not bombard you with emails. However, you will get an email and it will have the listing in that if there are multiple listings that you need to be mapped to. So, and it could cycle through once every 30 days. We're going to start out that way because we really need to get this mapping in shape. And as far as the mapping and the emails, again, we're not going to bombard you with them. It's just a necessity we have to do, at least in the very beginning. But I think in the long run, we'll continue to do the emails. It really, if you make a mapping, you should want to understand, especially, I mean, we have some multiples, 5 or 6 of them at a time. So if you've done that, you're going to want to keep up with it as well. So it'll help you track those mappings along with us. Julie's not held up a red, so that means I still have plenty of time and she's not gone. So I must be doing okay. Onboarding. So I think Steve or Melanie asked who was the first time. Is this are you new to the industry or new to that position can you raise your hands to that? Okay. So what we're trying to do, and again, early, I talked about this, Abby Fellinger started this. It's a subgroup of the ORCG. And we really felt like we were given the number of 1,500 turnovers a year in PCCs and ACCs. I asked twice, 1,500? Yeah. So with that large amount of turnovers, we started thinking about how can we help folks who are just walking into this position? How to this sheet and this document will help others within the industry. So it's really a great onboarding process. It's going to give you links to the important things that you would be doing as a PCC or ACC when you first come into the position. And it's also a good off to the side document for reminders of where to go to find the information. I apologize for not having the rest of this on here because when I took screenshots of this, we were finalizing the document. So it should be out and posted somewhere around the end of November. So if you have any suggestions about it, I think there's at the bottom of it, there's a contact that you can send in suggestions because we want to make this something that's very usable for you guys. And I may be running way ahead of time. That's all I have. So we're gonna take some questions or.
Yeah, great, Mark. We have a couple questions.
Sure, go ahead.
And there's been, oh, excellent. Okay, so now everybody else can hear. Okay, so there's been a lot of onboarding of renewable generators. And so it takes a little bit of work, but but I've been in this industry since well, when NERC standards, before NERC standards became effective.
Me too.
Yeah, okay. So when NERC was a corporation,
Yeah.
or council, any rate, the generators are sometimes saying, okay, who's the PC, who's the TP? And it would be really helpful if sometimes like they know from their interconnection agreement who they're signing up with, but if they could be able to go and see a mapping and make it, maybe available in the ER portal, or is there some place where they can go and say, based off from our interconnection, I am absolutely certain that am I in the Cal ISO RC region, or am I in the, southern, who is my RC, for example? So it would be helpful if it was made public. Is that going to be available with some of these changes?
So the mapping that I showed earlier of the chart table, would that be helpful if it was posted within our registration? And
Yeah, and I can't really see that. So can you describe it a little bit, because it's really blurry for me back here.
yeah, I apologize. And I took this from a NERC presentation
Sure.
that was doing for the focus group.
Yep.
So, and we can have discussions about putting this on the registration and certification site to help folks understand that.
That would be excellent. Yeah, just something so we can say, okay, I know this is a TOP. Who are the potential RCs, or who are the potential PCs?
So you're referring to when, let's say you're gonna map and you want to know who your RC is going to be.
Correct.
Oh, well, when you do the mapping, that's going to help you when you have the selection. It'll be a pull down. And if you're in a certain, it will tell you who that RC is. Does that make sense?
Based off from what? Picking your TOP?
Yes.
Okay. And in some cases, the TOP might have, I mean, it's maybe not in the WEC region, but there could be instances where there might be 2 TPs in a certain area, or 2 RCs,
So you're wanting to know if that was multiple TPs, which one would I pick?
Yeah, just a guide. It would be really helpful. I've got a lot of requests from different people. I'm Mary Jo Cooper with Cooper Compliance. I'm a consultant. So I've gotten a lot of requests from people saying, how do I find my TP? How do I find my PC? And we just know how to do it, but it does take a little, rolling up the sleeves and making some phone calls.
Okay.
Sometimes.
We can take a look at that, but also you can send them my way. I'd be happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great. All right. Does everybody hear me? Check. All right. Excellent. So thank you for that. I do want to just take a moment. I appreciate the question. We are trying to make a seamless experience for those online as well. So if you have the Whova available, we're going to be taking questions from this point forward on the Whova platform. It's kind of neat because people that are in the room here and people that are listening remotely are going to have the opportunity to do like and plus, and so they're moving dynamically on my screen. I've got about 9 questions so far the participants have asked. And so we'll be going through those. Now, some of the questions may not relate necessarily to the presenter. And so in that case, we'll take those back and we'll ask them. I just do want to acknowledge there was a question about the evidence retention or the evidence request tool on this one that is kind of outside the scope of what Mark's talking about here. So we hid that. But I'll try to moderate these as best I can. And we'll go through those. If you have problems getting onto the Whova to ask the questions, you can connect with Julie or Travis on a break, and there's some others we can clarify as we start up on the next one. But we hope this will be a good way to try to get participation from those that are here in the room and those that are remote to kind of weigh in on whether you have that question too, because you can plus it and vote it. And like I said, it'll move up and down. And then also if we don't get a chance to answer every question or maybe don't get everyone right, again, we're going to be taking these back after the workshop and we'll take a moment to collaborate more and look at them and put out some posted response to those questions. So the first question, Mark, is a question we got before the session to somebody that was looking forward to this. And the person asks, what actions will entities need to take in the ERO portal to transfer over the functional mapping to cores and by when?
So to transfer it over to cores, we'll be taking care of that. So the web CDMS, and I'm assuming that's what they're talking about. And that's already being migrated into cores now. So there shouldn't be anything that the entity will have to do.
Great. Okay, next question. This person, I think, thinks there's a lot of PCs in the West and is asking about whether WEC will take actions to clear up the relationship between TPs and PCs as part of this effort.
Again, I'd love to have that conversation, one-on-one conversation with you. I think it's important. And yes, we can clear that up. But, that's again, you're not taking over that responsibility for that entity. So, when you're a TP or you're being requested functional mapping to. So we can talk about that. Yes.
And then there's a couple of questions here about kind of existing mapping that's already occurred. So I'll kind of try to combine the senses here, but for folks that have already done mapping, kind of what's being used for that? How does that transition into this new mapping?
That's already using new mapping, is that?
Yeah, well, how will cores be updated with stuff that's already been mapped?
Oh, again, we're transferring all the mapping out of web CDMS into cores, and 95% of that's been completed already. And again, that's where that's why we'll do the validation in our phases, is to make sure that it gives you an opportunity to say, oh, this isn't right. So, that's what we want to, it's kind of a double check from what we've transferred.
Great. And I've got some thoughts on this, but also how do you think that the mapping enhances our monitoring work, compliance monitoring, or maybe more importantly, reliability and security overall?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have run across where there's no mapping, and we need to know that for the monitoring period. I mean, it's, how do we know to come and talk to you folks? Basically, I mean, I don't know, what's your thoughts, Steve?
Well, yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's a lot of obligations with respect to data exchange and just activities that occur where, we need to ensure that we know how these entities interact with each other and know that they're meeting their obligations. The rules are pretty clear also insofar as, ensuring that the transmission assets have a transmission operator. We've encountered cases where, transmission owners don't have a transmission operator. It's their obligation to ensure that they have a transmission operator under the rules. And so, that's a pretty, significant case of, of an example where, need to ensure that mapping is clear. But there's some obligations and relationships that support the interconnected nature of responsibilities on the grid. And so what's important in that regard. And then, how it informs monitoring is within, from a big picture, really informing, how well we understand that entity knows about what relationships it has and how well it interacts. And so that can inform, our view in some respects for planning our resources to ensure that we're monitoring appropriately and the right people. Hold on, my iPad is loading.
More questions?
Yes.
Can't imagine.
I'm just updating. Hold on a second. It's frozen for me.
And again, while Steve's taking a look at it, I'd love to talk about it with you. So whatever questions you may have at the breaks or whatever, feel free.
Okay, so here's one. It just popped up. It's this is a good question about where the kind of the line is for our certification review. So you need to let WEC know when EMS has been upgraded. Is that including updates? How much discretion is there? A lot of the EMS and SCADA updates are immaterial.
Yeah, you know, if you're just doing an upgrade from 3.0 to 3.01. We're concerned about really the SIP aspect of all the, you know, PSP. Are you changing any of that? What's the hardware changes that you're going to make? If it's just a software update, you know, I don't see that we need to know about that.
Yeah. And we take a look too, like if it is more significant and you have a question about where the line is, I think that, you know, where a phone call would come into play, because we're not interested in necessarily doing a certification review for every change, even beyond that.
Right.
So kind of look at it from a case by case basis to see kind of what impact, what the significance of that change is. Because at the end of the day, whether we participate in a certification review through an entity or not, as kind of Mark indicated, none of the obligations of that entity change. So none of the obligations for reliability and security under the reliability standards change. It doesn't lessen any obligation to remain compliant with what you're obligated to.
And I think the ROP has given us that leeway with the changes to it, that we, you know, we can kind of make the decision and make the call if this is a lesser activity, then we really need to, because trust me, we know how busy you are because we're that busy. So, you know, we'll be.
And I think you already addressed this, but just to make sure I address it, it's, you know, the mapping that happened in the past, 2016, 2017, that's being implemented into cores. Will WEC be re-verifying those, or do folks need to do it again?
Yeah. So we've verified a lot of it, and we're pretty happy with what we see. So we hope there's minimal work for you guys, and it'll be a two-phase process. Where actually the software, excuse me, is going to be implemented where you'll only see the top half as we go through the verification stages, and you'll be able to do the work and verify that. And then the later stage will be when the bottom half will be visible to you. And, you know, we're trying to make this as not simple. I hate to say that word because, you know, as soon as you do that, it's not going to be simple. But we think it'll be much easier to go through its two-stage process.
Great. And then I'm seeing a question here about transmission planner charging a GOP for services, and the GOP doesn't want to pay, so the mapping doesn't occur. I think we're certainly interested in that. So you know, we'll take that back and look at it a little bit more, but I don't want to, you know, I wouldn't presume to say anything about the interrelationships and contractual kind of basis that different organizations have. So
Right.
give me just a second to confirm. Yeah, okay, one more, Mark. And this is from a GOP, a process in cores for GOP to register instead of just placing a comment. I'm not sure I'm understanding that one, but.
Well, if you're, say that again.
Is a process in place, will there be a process put in place within cores for the GOP to register instead of just placing a comment?
Yes. Yes.
What about unmapping? Will this tool allow an entity to unmap, or are there other steps for this?
First, I'd like to know about it. If you're going to unmap, give me a call first or send me an email, and then I'll help you along with unmapping. But yes, there is the ability to unmap in the new system, and if I'm not mistaken, I apologize. I think it goes through we don't acknowledge that. We will see it but we don't acknowledge it. It's not an approval on our part, but again, that's why I said, give me a call or email me, let's talk about it.
And is the mapping at the entity level or the facility level?
It's at the entity level.
What about a process to formalize a primary TP in a case where a generator has interconnection to more than one? Example, and my iPad is hovering over something with the voltage schedule does related to VAR2, R2.
I think that I'd have to look at that a little
Okay,
bit closer.
we'll take that one.
And I'll answer it back in Hoover.
How about pseudo-tie functional relationships? Does the mapping address that?
I'm sorry, what was the first part?
Does functional mapping address pseudo-tie functional relationships and responsibilities?
No. I'd like to have that conversation too.
Mark's gonna be busy on the phone here in the next a couple days. So who gets the notifications for these registration verifications?
Who gets the notification for
Yeah.
the?
Those
verification?
notifications you were showing earlier.
So if when you map, then but the entity that you mapped to will then receive that notification. In other words, it's looking for the acknowledgement portion. So it's going to tell you, hey, you have a mapping still hanging out there, need to go in and do an acknowledgement. So that's when you'll go into cores under the functional mapping section and then do your acknowledgement. That will go to both. Yeah, we struggled with that on who, but my understanding it's going to go to both.
So for those listening in, we just said it'll go to the PCC and the ACC.
ACC, yeah. We
Great.
just don't want to flood. We didn't want to flood everybody's, and we're not flooding it. So I just want to make sure that once every 30 days, I don't think and it's a great reminder. I need those reminders all the time.
Okay, and how far in advance should an entity notify WEC for footprint registration changes?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I don't care if you're doing something in 2026, let me know, because, and here's the reason why. And when I say me, I mean our team, because the earlier the better, because we can put it, you know, it's a planning situation for us as well. So certification, registration, send us an email, let us know. I received one this morning that they're going to do something in the late 2024. Perfect. Go in and put it in cores, because then we download that information into a tracking system for us. So the earlier the better.
And Mark, you talked a lot about cores training. So where do people find, or you talked a lot about cores, where do people find cores?
So you can go online to NERC's website and their training section. I apologize, I don't have that link. You know, I can put it in Hoover later on, and you can go and it has a full blown for each section of cores or the whole thing. So it's good training.
If you don't find it, just let them know. Send us an email.
Yeah.
We'll make sure you get it too. We're happy to make sure you're linked up to that training. Well, so this is kind of related to what I mentioned earlier, but and we probably don't have a super specific answer, because facts and circumstances will matter. But you know, what happens if a TOP, BA, and RC doesn't agree to be that entity for you? Does WEC force them to be your RC, BA, and TOP for a particular entity during the registration process?
Again, call me.
Yeah. But yeah, under the way that the rules are constructed, it's the entities that need a TOP or a BA or the RC that are responsible for securing it. And so, you know, that gets into some contractual and business kind of interactions that need to occur that really would be appropriate for us.
And the rules of procedure do kind of tag those
Mhm.
on who needs to be mapped. So, you know, as far as.
I lost it, but it was how does the mapping time with registration, I suppose, for new registrants?
So once you get your certification, NCR number back. So right now it's a part of the registration in ERO portal. Of course, you have to go in through the ERO portal first, and it is part of that. It will no longer be part of that in the new mapping section. It will come back when your NCR number has been established.
Okay, here's one about they said qualified recertification, but really we call it a certification review. But if somebody does have a certification review for an EMS upgrade, is there a set of attributes an entity will need to provide to WEC for the successful certification review?
Yeah, so we have a certification document online. You want to go in and fill that form out and give us a little detail on what's taking place, like whether it's hardware, and then we'll send you a questionnaire. And then we'll want to have the conversation so we understand what
Yeah.
exactly you're doing.
Yeah, and I think the next question kind of hits that too. I don't think there's a black and white answer in all cases, but it implicates the importance of having the conversation so Mark and team can determine kind of the threshold for doing a review or not, but then also just knowing. And if an entity's upgrading from a physical environment to virtual, does that require a review?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I think you've covered, but it's still with the shutdown of CDMS. How do we capture updates?
Capture updates.
I suppose updates to mapping and.
Oh, you will receive an email again, if someone's mapped to you, or you'll go into cores and do the mapping. I hope I answered that one.
How public is this? Do entities get to see the mapping of other entities?
No. Is there something behind that?
Does a non-BES hydro plant need to do mapping?
If you're registered as a GO, then we need to see the mapping.
Yeah, so I think the registration is the link here, right?
Yeah,
If you're
exactly.
part of the NERC registry, then you need to.
Yeah,
participate
just
in
because
that.
we're taking it out of the front end of the ERO portal when you fill out that registration, we still need to know the mapping. You'll still get emails and you'll still come back and say, you need to go in and do your functional mapping.
Yeah. We might have to look at this one a little more closely, but does WEC require notification from entities related to facilities or elements that meet the BES definition exclusion criteria? Does WEC have to agree with the self-determination? And I think, and I'm not sure if they're talking about just the base, inclusions and exclusions or the exclusion
That's
process.
What it sounds, that's what it sounds like to me, an exclusion process. Yeah, we'd have to, I'll look at that one a little bit closer and if you want to talk to me about it, please give me a call so I can understand it a little better. See if I can answer it in email.
Great, just checking with Julie, see if I'm missing any of the. Okay, how can an entity confirm WEC has the most current information to determine if updates are needed?
How does WEC know that? Say that again. I'm sorry.
How can WEC, let me see that one more time. How can an entity confirm WEC has the most current information to determine if updates are needed? So I think this is a case where if somebody thinks that they've updated it, they want to make sure they're confirming with us. How do they initiate that to confirm that what you have is what they think you have? Yeah,
and that's also part of your COP. And when you have that relationship with the compliance oversight plan, all that data should be in there as well to make sure or inform the folks who do the COP. Because we need a closer relationship, and that's what we're trying to do as well. Is that if there's been a registration change, we'll send it to the folks who do the compliance oversight plan and make sure they're up to date. Scott Brooksby and Patrick Van Gelder will tell you all about that in a little while.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark. And if more questions come in, we'll take those as part of our work after the workshop to publish that. I appreciate this. Before we break now, I'm going to call Michael Dalebout up to the stage for a moment.
Thanks, everybody. Please send me an email.